welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello and welcome to Syosset Public Library's Turn the Page podcast. I am happy to have young adult author Annie Fox back on the podcast to speak about The Little Things That Kill, a Teen Afterlife Apology Tour. This was a very interesting book that delves with the teenager that's in the afterlife that tries to figure out how she actually died, and was it really something that was what was the trigger for her death. And it deals with some very serious, I will say, a trigger warning. It does deal with teen suicide topics and grief and different things that might affect, teens going through very difficult situations. So I did want to mention that before we talk about it, but I'm so happy to talk to you again, Annie, on our podcast about this book.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I think it's a perfect book for this season as we're approaching Halloween. Kind of spooky, definitely otherworldly. So yeah, I'm happy to talk about it.
Yes. So what's different about this book is the main character, Nicole. She finds herself in a place in the afterlife called Substation 15. And she soon finds out that there's other teens her age in that afterlife place, and they have all something in common about their deaths. And it deals into some witchy things, like her best friend is able to communicate with her. I especially liked that point of view. Isabella, but she goes by Izzy, and how she is able to communicate with Nicole. It's told in three perspectives. So we actually get Cassie too, which is kind of like, like that person that's like a frenemy, they're kind of friends, but then they also get into some scuffles about different things, as we find out as we go through, how Nicole, met her untimely end as she did. So can you talk about the inspiration, how you came up with all of this?
Yeah, it's really interesting where the kernel of an idea for a novel comes from. Sometimes it's a dream, sometimes it's something you hear in a podcast or interview with someone else that you read. Sometimes it's a real life experience. In this case, it was a newspaper article that someone sent me. So I guess you could say on some vague level that this is based on a real experience, a real life adventure, so to speak. But obviously the newspaper article talked about the early demise of this young girl, and it mentioned two friends who might have been implicated in her decision to do what she did to end her life. But clearly it stopped there.
Okay.
Newspaper reporting doesn't go into the afterlife.
Right.
So my novelist brain took over from there, because I think what novelists tend to do is they speculate. It's like, what would happen if?
Right.
So for me, it was, what would happen if Nicole's story didn't end with her death?
Right.
And he was still actively trying to find an ending for herself.
Yes. And you don't very often see this kind of narrative where the character, I can't think of another young adult or any other kind of book where I've seen the character still speaking, from the afterlife, or, someplace, where they're now dead, so that was definitely different. And also to have three different, points of view was something also. Like, how did you come up with that instead of just telling, like, just from one perspective? Why did you decide to write it that way?
Well, I'll tell you, it was a creative challenge to do it that way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Probably would have been easier to just write, third person narrator. But it felt like each of these girls had such a unique perspective. I wanted to get inside their heads and have the story told from their perspective. And I think what makes it kind of interesting is, in their own ways, they're all unreliable narrators.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so
Definitely.
as a reader, you're wondering, how much of this should I take with a grain of salt? Is she telling the truth? Part of the unreliability of the narrations coming from each of the three girls is denial. Some of it is a lack of memory. some of it is guilt, and some of it is just not knowing because they weren't there at that time. And so it's one of those cases where like all the blind people are feeling the elephant, the
Right.
old thing, and it's like, okay, well, an elephant is holding the tail ropey. It's like, yeah, well, that's one part of the truth. The tail is one part of the truth. And so I went with this device to tell the story because I wanted to give everybody a perspective and let them learn from each other in the way that they did. I also wanted my readers to see that nobody holds all of the truth.
Right.
And
Mhm.
that's good for us as humans to know to keep an open mind and to listen.
Exactly. And that's so important. And like all of our experiences in life are shaped by, our experiences with other people too. And I think that that's what this book also speaks about, like our relationships, our friendships, like it kind of makes us who we are as people too. And we're all flawed. Like no one is perfect. And it's like, navigating life. And in this case, she's navigating the afterlife too. And until she can kind of move on in a sense, she needs to figure out what exactly happened to her. And
Yeah. What happened and what choices she made that brought her to that place.
right, exactly.
Sometimes I think we want to hold other people hold other people responsible for the choices we made. So I think that's another theme of the book as I was writing it, is that the moment to moment choices we make matter. And even if you're not aware of it at the time, which is really hard to be in the moment when you make a choice, especially if you're feeling angry or, you receive a text that just sets you off, you can respond in the instant, but it may not be the most helpful response. If you recall a scene where Nicole is with Grace, her mentor, and they're
Yeah,
at a lake and they're throwing, I think Nicole is just tossing stones into the middle of the lake and she's watching the ripples.
right.
And that symbol of um, you set something in motion. It's just a stone, but you think about the variables. Um, how heavy is the stone? How forcefully are you throwing it? Is there any wind that's going to, slow down the trajectory of the stone? And then when it lands, those ripples keep spreading and spreading, and those are kind of out of your control at that point. And so that was also part of what I was trying to get at in that way.
Definitely, that's like one of the symbolic passages in the book. And also, like, I think for a deeper meaning, like of how social media and the way we communicate now can really, play, like, really impact us, I think, more than like as, kids figuring it out using phones and technology, like how much that really impacts people a lot more than they think it does, and to
Yeah,
be aware, be mindful of that. No.
it's so hard because our emotions are on such a short string, a, a tight trigger, and that's just the way we are as human beings. It used to be that we had more time to stop and reflect because the way to respond was not in our pocket or in our hand. And so you had to stop and think. I think about 19th century letter writing. You had something you wanted to say to someone, and you sat down and you composed your thoughts. You wrote a letter, pen and ink, and then you sent it off somewhere. And then maybe you waited a month or two,
Yeah,
and
it was a
where the
while.
letter was going. It was a while, and maybe some of the emotion that you wrote with had dissipated, and a zillion things. I don't think the digital age necessarily helps us be more um, mindful of our choices.
Yes, and it's interesting, even though there's, a lot of elements of like, modern communication, also Nicole, the main character, keeps a diary, and that becomes a very important part. She had a diary, when she was living, of course, and that becomes an important aspect of the story. Like, and it's, a lot is written in there, and how people like come to access that, and then it's all, their interpretation of events too from reading it. So get
Yeah,
to
the
see that. And
choices.
she forgets a lot, in the afterlife of what happened before, even though there was many things that happened. So,
Yeah, she goes in kind of with a blank slate. And the premise is that she has 30 days to figure out what
right.
happened.
Hmm.
And that necessitates her going back to Earth and figuring out a way to communicate with people who may have parts of the truth.
And it's interesting how she communicate, like using like it's similar, like akin to like a Ouija board kind of thing. It's like
Mhm.
her friend Isabel used like the one that's into witchy things, like she communicates with her through the board there. So it's like, and then she figures it's like I as like, and then is, and then it was like, oh, and then they're speaking through the board. So that was very interesting. Like, how did you come up with her character? Because I thought that was my favorite perspective to read from, actually.
Yeah, Isabel is great. She's got a lot of actual powers.
Yes, which was cool.
Yep. And I tried to be really respectful of her Wiccan
Yeah,
practices. I knew there needed to be some way that Nicole could communicate and get part of her story from someone who she left behind. And it just seemed to me that if she had a friend who actually could communicate with the spirit world, well, that would be kind of cool. And so I started building the character of Isabel. And even though she has power, she's so vulnerable. She's germophobic. She's always imagining ailments. And let's face it, she's an odd duck.
yeah,
She's she's weird. And the kids in her school, she carries a spell book around. She
right.
wears a crystal. She chants. She does stuff. She's on one level, I admire how authentic she is to herself, and how she just doesn't care.
Yeah,
But you
I
see,
like that too. Yeah,
yeah, but you see in the diary from Nicole's perspective when they first start high school, and her friendship with Isabel, which is really really an old friendship. When she
right.
gets to high school, the social cost for her to still remain friends with Isabel becomes too high, and so that's a choice she makes to cut off that really important friendship. And that's written up in the diary, stuff she never shared with Isabel, but ultimately Isabel reads it after Nicole's dead. And that hurts. And so this idea of it all matters,
Yeah,
the way we treat people matters.
exactly. It does. It matters so much. And you talking about that transition from, in young adulthood to going to high school for middle school. Like middle school is hard enough for kid, like you're becoming a teenager. And then when you're like really like full blown teenager in high school, that it's things change and like the social dynamics change. And I think you have access to more technology now than when you're in high school. So it's just it makes things like a lot more complicated and invasive. Like you really know so much about people too. So
Yeah, and it's interesting for me, as a side note, for the last 28 years, I've been answering teen email online
hmm.
through my website. And so yes, I was a teenager, and I have a daughter and a son who went through that. I now have a grandson who's in middle school. But I see from these emails that even though the developmental stuff is the same as it always was before technology, that self-doubt, the wanting to find your place with your peers, sometimes masking how you really feel so that you'll be accepted. All of that stuff is so classic. It's the way adolescents transition from childhood into adulthood, finding their peer group and their place. But yeah, the technology piece, which is not something I grew up with, is it just makes it harder.
Yeah, it's so hard on them. Like even like there was technology when I was in, like there were like the very first smartphones when I was in high school. Maybe I think they had like the BlackBerry, I think was that was like what was around and maybe like the first iPhone was coming out, but I still had like a time period before it was like really like I didn't have a smartphone from like 10 years old. So
Right.
still a
Yeah.
little bit at a different time. So I
Yeah.
can't even imagine. It's like so different now.
It is, and
Um,
it's harder for the kids because developmentally they're not any more mature.
Right.
And,
It's just, yeah.
and so this impulse to respond when you're feeling upset because your fingers are on the keyboard, it's really hard to control that impulse when you're hurt. And you're being pressured to gang up on somebody else. All that stuff is very, very difficult and challenging. I don't have answers. I wrote this book in part to help young readers see that I get that it's hard, that it was hard for these three girls. And on many levels, they had to live with the consequences of the choices they made.
Yes, and we didn't speak about Cassie's perspective yet, but like how is it writing that and putting all those three together, including Cassie in the mix?
Well, Cassie, as you said, is the frenemy of
Mm-hmm.
Nicole. They share a love of music. They both have wonderful singing voices.
Mm-hmm.
They met in a talent show audition. Well, they were both supposed to audition with the song Titanium, and they didn't really know each other. So Cassie is one of these people who I call her a tough girl who's hiding a very vulnerable interior. She doesn't have a very healthy home life, and she doesn't feel powerful at home. And so when she leaves her front door every day, she puts on armor, so to speak, so that no one will mess with her. She's very wounded, and she comes off as a monster on some level, really callous. And and Nicole is a very different kind of friend for Cassie, and Cassie recognizes that. But there's a sticking point because Cassie has this longtime boyfriend named Alex, and Nicole falls for him hard. And so that creates tension between the girls, and it's kind of like a love triangle. And it's a challenging situation for mostly for Nicole. Nicole
Yeah.
is trying to figure out how to befriend Cassie so she can get closer um, to, to Alex. Cassie, as we said, is vulnerable. She doesn't trust many people. And yeah, it's sticky. Like a
Yeah.
lot of teen relationships, it's
Yeah, it's a
sticky.
very tough, even though that, it's kind of like an escape. In the book, we see the afterlife and we see how, people are communicating with someone in the afterlife. That's not something we would, come across like, it wouldn't be something that a lot of teenagers would be to do, or it's like commonplace. But in the book, we see that. So we have that kind of escape. It's something a little different to tell the same story of like, what all teens are dealing with. So,
Yeah, that's what I try to do. I think when young adult fiction is done well,
hmm
it taps right into where the readers are. And the fictional universe you create is almost a sideline
yeah.
if you hit those places so that the reader can identify with the characters and what the character is going through. And then I think there's the vicarious part, which I think all fiction does a wonderful job of. It's just like placing you in the shoes of the protagonist so that you identify closely enough and you're going along her journey with her. And when she has to deal with stuff, you root for her. When she has a setback, you grieve for her. And all this stuff is vicarious with the idea that you're learning something on some level as a reader, just going through this fictional journey, with the idea also that it empowers you, that when you're dealing with something like facing up to the truth, being authentic, telling someone what you really mean, standing up for someone more vulnerable than yourself, any of that stuff, because you've gone through it in a story, you feel like, okay, I could do this.
And I think what you can also see as the reader is that you can almost like find something in all the characters that you can kind of identify with which I think was your goal too. Like definitely think like if you had to ask like, what was something that you want people to get out of this book? I think definitely like there's aspects of like, we can find in a lot of people that we see in ourselves, and it's like how we present ourselves,
Yeah.
for the world too. And that's our experiences are shaped by others around us.
It's the stuff that we present and it's the stuff that we hide. I think it's really interesting that we're coming up to Halloween because
Yes,
Halloween is the time where it's okay to put a mask on.
definitely.
And I think a lot of young people, unfortunately, spend a lot of their days throughout the year with a mask of some kind on because they want to be accepted. We all want to be accepted. So when these three girls realize that there's nothing to pretend anymore, that they can tell the truth to Nicole, apologize, and she needs to apologize to people, and they tell the truth to themselves. There is such an empowerment that comes from it. I felt very close to all of these girls. It took me 10 years to write this book from its first inkling of an idea to when it was published in February of 2024, that I got extraordinarily close to them. And I wanted to give them the the ending that they deserved because I had put them through an awful lot and I wanted to in some way um, have them earn not a happily ever after, but a hopeful ending. And
Yeah, it
I think I did that.
definitely. I think reading the ending and then the epilogue was like bittersweet in a sense. A lot of things were, it was all like closed up and the story had ended, but you definitely didn't see that coming. Like it was definitely a surprise, I think, from the beginning of the book, what you thought to like reading through all the characters' experiences and how fleshed out everything was. Because this was a little bit like not a super long read, but you definitely have enough pages to like get to know the characters very well. So by the end, it's definitely like not spoiling anything, but it's different than what you expect. It's
Good.
definitely a mystery to be solved.
Yeah, think of it as a paranormal mystery.
Definitely. You suspend disbelief a little bit, but what's so relatable in a sense is like even though it is paranormal, you can still take all these elements and these are experiences that young people go through, unfortunately. And
Yeah. I
you
think
know,
that there's power to how weird the story is, that the
yes,
setting is literally out of this world,
it is. Yeah.
because I think it makes it more memorable than if it were
Hmm.
just set in an everyday high school.
Hmm.
Um,
Yes.
so yeah, I did that because I wanted to make it challenging and interesting for myself to have to imagine, for example, what is Substation 15 like? What do they do there? Who runs this place?
Right.
What are
You
the
learn,
rules?
yeah, getting through and all the different characters that you encounter. And it's like all these people are here and you're trying to figure out what's going on. So it's like each layer you find out a little bit more,
Yeah, and
what's going on.
I hope that part of it was equally interesting as the stuff that went on Earth, that hmm, that she's being held responsible for her choices and that she has to figure it out and she has 30 days to figure it out. It's kind of
Right.
like an exam.
Yeah, it's like doesn't seem that long a period of time, but it's like she needs to do that to like work things out and be able to move on in this world. It's its own world and its own right. So we're jumping between the two worlds, but everything makes sense in the end. But you have to pay attention, and there's a lot of depth to it. And even like her parents' story, not going into detail, but like when you learn about that, that adds layers to Nicole's
Yeah,
character, like losing her mom at a young age, and then like what her dad goes through,
yeah.
in that experience too. So,
I wanted to give a roundness and a
mhm,
fullness to all of the three girls by
mhm.
giving us a background into Nicole's family history, Isabel's family history, um, and
You're
Cassie's
right.
family. It helps us understand the girls better, and that's not often, it's not typical that, you meet someone, you establish an opinion about them pretty much right away. You have no idea where they come from.
Right. And it's like you definitely learn so much of their backstory. And that's like what you said earlier about being able to empathize with them and like understand their choices and
Yeah, and if
or
even saying I wouldn't have done that, reading
right.
some stuff, you say, yeah, I wouldn't have, but I understand the feelings underneath it. I might not have gone to that extreme, but I have felt jealous. I have felt scared. I have felt rejected. Um, so I think emotions are something we can all relate to.
Exactly. Definitely. And all of them were so different, but all their stories intertwined, and that's how we get the story. And it was definitely spooky, a lot of spooky elements to it too, like the communication methods. A lot of them I had never heard of that I learned about in the story. So that was
Well,
something different. Yeah.
some of them are made up, but some of them actually, I mean, I made up all the spells that Isabel
Hmm.
goes through, but red candle versus black candle, the herbs, that kind of stuff. I did a lot of research.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I can tell
my
you
really
definitely did.
dear friend Elizabeth, yeah, here's our cover, beautiful cover.
Yeah,
And
that is a
Liz
very,
Annie
very
Holmes is a very dear friend of mine, and she's the cover illustrator. And she was kind of my go-to person on the Wiccan stuff. I said, okay, is there such thing as a love potion? How would that work? And so she told me some stuff. I embellished it. I did some online research in the Wiccan community sites. It was enlightening, definitely.
yeah,
So I
definitely.
wanted to bring that in, and I just love all these three girls for different reasons.
Yeah, it just you can tell how much like research you did and how much you cared about the characters too to tell their story. That definitely is very evident.
Thank you. You know, I've been teaching some fiction writing workshops and talking about what is the fiction writer's job. And my idea about that is that the writer's job is to make the reader care about imaginary characters
And
and
it's not,
situations
yeah,
that never happen.
right.
So that the only way I believe you can do that effectively is that you truly care as a writer. You truly care about your characters.
Yeah, and that's what you can always tell, like when an author cares about their characters, like how much depth you give them, and like if you were to take these characters out, like they seem like you can imagine them in your head, and see them like almost like if they jumped out of the story, you could see them living and breathing. So
Yeah, those are the best books. I love books like
yeah,
that.
or in the case of the afterlife, like existing in the afterlife, but there's just a different
Yeah.
plane, a different level of existence.
Did you have a favorite character either on the afterlife or on Earth that wasn't necessarily one of the three girls? Because I spent a lot of time with the secondary cast as well.
Yeah, I think I really thought the Alex was interesting as a character
Mhm.
too. So I like how, you did spend time with that, like explaining that whole love triangle and Alex's interactions between Nicole and Cassie. I thought that that was very interesting.
Yeah, he's conflicted. He's
Yeah,
not a bad guy. Um, but he gets something very different from his relationship with both of these girls.
definitely. Yes, you do. And then the counselor in the afterlife too was an interesting character. Too Grace.
Grace.
Grace, yeah.
Yeah, she
Grace.
is interesting. Says that she looks like she's 12 years old, except the sadness in her eyes make her look like she's at least 1,000 years old.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting to think about. Yeah, so I
She,
thought that, yeah, her character was very interesting too. Yeah, there are a lot of secondary characters.
I,
We
I
talked-
love, um, I love Nicole's dad.
Yes, that was Nicole's dad was also who I was thinking of. Yeah, and it was
I,
so like, yeah, it was like, oh, thinking it was like emotional, a lot of the parts of that book too, thinking about how
oh,
he deals with everything
yeah,
too.
it's
Nicole's
so hard for
yeah,
him. So,
yeah, really felt for him. Yeah, that was character I was thinking of also. So, yeah.
someone else I really enjoyed writing and being with was Mr. Robert at the Child Care Center.
Yes.
He was someone that brought so much, I want to say love, but acceptance to Cassie that she'd never felt before.
Yeah, and like you said, like Cassie, it's like hiding like so much, like, deep down. And it's like
And
to see that
he
kind of,
saw right through it,
and
right?
he saw right through it, right?
And it's like, oh,
Yeah,
wow. She'd been fooling people for so long with her
right.
armor and her toughness. And here's someone who sees right through it and she doesn't know what to do. But he doesn't expect a lot of her. And being around those little kids is so educational for her.
Yes, definitely brought a lot out that you hadn't seen inside of her. And
Right.
definitely
Yeah.
different perspectives. But that's the that was such a strength of this book of how these characters evolve, and you want to see characters be dynamic. So that definitely in this book was something that happened, and you're seeing the three main lead, the three girls, but then you see all these secondary characters too and how they play into the story. But it's definitely a spooky paranormal mystery, I would call it. I definitely think it excelled on that. So I think it's a good recommendation for teens and adults. It deals with some heavy topics, as discussed earlier, but I think if you're coming into it with an open mind, it's also an educational resource. I mentioned there's the in the back of the book is the suicide prevention information about that too, which is really important, I think, to have in the story. But definitely how the story was told was definitely different, paranormal, and it's a fresh look on the topic.
Fresh look. I wanted to show you. See what
Oh,
I'm
I
sure.
love I love that. That's so cool. I see the because they won't be able to see our listeners won't be
Yeah,
able to see the visuals, but that I see it's a cool
right.
mug with the title on it. How did you come up with the title? That's my last thought.
Oh, okay. We've all heard the expression, it's the little things that count. The,
Right.
li- the little kindnesses, saying thank you, showing appreciation, stuff like that. But in this story, I think it's the little things, sometimes the thoughtless things that can hurt. So I called it the little things that kill, meaning wound, hurt, stay with you, rather than support and make you feel loved. Yeah.
And the added part to it, the Teen Afterlife Apology Tour. Yeah.
Yeah. I tell you, I'm big on subtitles.
Yeah.
I think The Hobbit is called There
There
and
and back
Back Again.
there and back again. Yes.
I love subtitles.
Yeah, it adds to it,
Um,
but it is, yeah, there and
So I
back
thought,
again.
okay, what's the subtitle here? Because The Little Things That Kill doesn't really say enough about what it is.
Right.
And then I thought, okay, well, what is this actually? And then I just got the idea of an afterlife apology tour. And it just cracked me up. I said, that's it. It's a teen friendship afterlife apology
It
tour.
is. Yeah.
And it is.
That makes complete sense because it is an apology tour on the part of the main characters there and how they all interact and find out about each other. And it takes the afterlife to make that happen, like fully,
Mhm.
unfortunately. But
Yeah,
in the
for
end,
sure.
like they all discover more about all of each other too, about themselves too, I think. So,
I also want to say that as an indie author, especially with a book that was 10 years in the making, I was very gratified by the reception the book has gotten um, from readers on Goodreads, but also from Kirkus Reviews.
yes, Kirkus, I saw the review, had a very nice
It,
review.
it gave it a starred review, which is rare enough for indie books. It's even rarer. And there will be a special announcement on December 15th about this book, which I cannot disclose
Ooh,
yet,
very exciting.
but Kirkus will be announcing it. And it just, I say that for anybody who aspires to be a writer and thinks, oh, I need to get an agent, I need to get a
Mhm.
big publishing. This is the time for indie authors to write the book you want to write, and you will get it reviewed. And if it is the book that is the best version of the book that you can write because you've gone ahead and hired an editor and gotten a professional team behind it in terms of layout and cover design, then you can compete with people who are with the big publishers. So don't be discouraged.
I
Write the book.
think that's really inspirational to our listeners because I know amongst my friends, like they're such great writers and I think they want to get themselves out there. So I think hearing that from an author and going through not using a big publisher, to
Not
get
even
your
an
work out
agent.
there.
Not even an
Wow.
agent.
That's
Can
really
really,
impressive. And to get a starred, and look, you got a starred review in my purchase.
and something else
And
coming.
something else. Wow. That's going to be so exciting to hear that news. So that's on December 15th. Will that be announced on your website?
On my website, but also through Kirkus.
And through Kirkus. Wow.
Yeah.
And such a big.
I just wanted to say that the idea that your story has to go through gatekeepers before someone decides it's good enough. The first one traditionally is the literary agent. That's not the case anymore.
So there's a lot more ways now because I think, some people I know that are in writing and want to get their work published, they ask these questions. That's good to know now that things are a lot more, you have more accessibility.
Yeah.
Get your work out there.
Yeah. Just make sure that when you get your work out there, you've done due diligence and made sure that it's edited and it looks like, it looks professional.
Yeah. Well, Annie, thank you so much. So your book is available right now. The Little Things That Kill a Teen Afterlife Apology Tour is out there for
It's out there
available
on
purchase
audiobook,
and
ebook, paperback, and hardcover. Anywhere you get your books, you can get it. And it was my debut YA novel. And you and I had a conversation previous about Lita Simtar, Two Planets, which is my second book, which came out in March of this year, and YA sci-fi. So both indie published books, and
so go back to our listeners, go back and find the Lita Simtar.
That was such a fun
podcast.
conversation.
Yes, that was. So please go back and listen to that one also in our on their Turn the Page website. But we're going to close this chapter today. But Annie, thank you so much again, Annie Fox, and we'll look for that announcement on December 15th. But for right now, all your books are available for purchase. This one is The Little Things That Kill a Teen Afterlife Apology Tour. To have the title again, thank you so much. We're going to close this chapter of Turn the Page today.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.